without further ado, I'd like to welcome our first speaker. Eric Rittmeyer is a emotional intelligence expert. He's the author of The Emotional Marine. And I want to thank you, Eric, for your service. Eric is a former Marine himself. How are you doing, Eric? How's everything?
I'm wonderful. Thank you for the intro. And I totally agree with everything you just said. I'm so excited to be here with you guys.
Thank you so much, Eric. And Eric, just for geographic purposes, where are you streaming from today? Where are you joining us from?
This is funny. That's a trick question, Serge, because I'm actually located in Baltimore, Maryland, but I'm traveling. So I'm in Florida. I'm in Orlando, right by Orlando, Florida right now.
Wow. Good to know, Eric. Eric, I'm in New Jersey. You should know that as well. Eric, again, don't want to take any longer than I already have, but let me just, number one, thank you for the third time for your service. Number two, was really excited to and looking forward to your session. And I'm going to exit now and let you take it away, Eric. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Suresh. Yeah, and thank you for the kind words. And yeah, what an awesome opportunity, man. I'm just so excited. When I got the invite, I love these types of events, and I think what happens, like you were just talking about a minute ago, Suresh, I think what happens is we so often just totally, not disregard, but we put no emphasis on the mental piece of our health. You can ask somebody, when's the last time you got the oil changed in your car? They'll know exactly when it is. You can talk to somebody and ask them, how much can you lift at the gym? And they can tell you. But when it comes to the mental piece, for whatever reason, we're just a society that we're just taught to suppress our feelings. That's a major problem. I'm so infatuated with my topic of mental toughness and emotional intelligence. And the minute somebody hears I'm a speaker, they automatically assume, well, you're a motivational guy. You're out there pushing motivational stuff. And that's not what my topic is about at all. This is not high fives and unicorns and Skittles and singing songs around the campfire. Mental toughness and emotional intelligence is all about mind control. It's about remaining in control of our emotions. We're taught no skills on this. So as a society, we're pushed through a school system that teaches us to memorize and regurgitate. You go to school, you retain information. Those of us that are able to retain the most information get the best grades on the test. That means we get into the best colleges, which are supposed to give us the best degrees and get us the highest paying jobs. The problem is there's something missing there. And what we find is that people aren't taught any types of skills for how to express their feelings, for how to deal with people that they may disagree with, to how to handle opposing points of view. So what we have now is a society of people who have gone through and been told to just, hey, this is work. Turn off the emotions, leave them at the front door. You're here to do work. After you leave, you can turn the emotions back on. The problem is that's impossible. We can't do that. We can't suppress the emotion. And it's like anything else in life. When you suppress something long enough, at some point, it's going to overflow, right? So I'm probably a lot older than the people that are on here watching. But when I was a kid, my parents used to tell me, don't hold in your sneezes. If you hold in your sneezes, your lungs are going to collapse. It's the same exact concept with emotions. The issue is, again, we have got to receive some sort of training for this. Here's the thing about emotions. Emotion and logic is inversely related. So as you become more emotional, you become less logical. We're not aware of this emotional response that we have. So we're hardwired to feel first and think later. We're emotional creatures. Every single interaction we have is going to elicit some sort of emotional response. If we don't know that we're in an emotional state of mind, we react. It's a knee-jerk type thing. Somebody says something we don't like, we just spat out whatever we're going to say because we're in an emotional state of mind, as opposed to processing information logically, then responding. So reacting and responding are two separate things. When it comes to emotion and logic, if we can be aware of the emotion, and it's not about trying to turn it off. That's one of the biggest misconceptions with emotions. People say, well, Eric, you're a Marine, right? You can just turn off the emotion and you're a robot and you train me how to turn off the emotion. And that is not what it's about, because it's impossible to do. It's about recognizing it and understanding how to channel that emotion into a positive thing. We don't know how to do this. So instead of teaching people how to turn off the emotion, which we can't do, we have to teach them to recognize it. It all starts with understanding that when we're emotional, we're going to say and do things that we're probably going to regret. You know this all the time. I refer to this as being intoxicated in emotion, drunk in emotion. You become so overcome with emotion that you cannot think logically. So no matter what somebody produces for you, a fact, a statistic, it doesn't matter. You're incapable of seeing it, because what's happening is we're allowing our hearts to guide us. So we're totally overriding what we see with our eyes based on what we feel with our heart. That's a major, major problem. Now, there's a time for emotion. There's a time we should go with our heart. There's a time we should go with our gut and these warm, fuzzy feelings. The problem is when we start using that and we start mixing it with things in real life, like business, for instance, or even mental health issues. This is a big problem with mental health. In the Marine Corps, we had this phrase. It was called improvise, adapt, and overcome. When we were faced with some sort of adversity, a wall, a barrier, didn't matter. We were taught to improvise, adapt, and overcome. You find a way to get through because we have a mission to accomplish. I feel like a lot of people, they try to apply that same sort of mentality of trying to correct that problem they're having mentally, and they can't do it on their own. So what happens is they say, well, you know what? I'm feeling these feelings I've never felt before. I don't really know how to handle them because I haven't been taught how to express them. So what am I going to do? Well, I can't reach out to anybody because if I do, I'm afraid somebody's going to say I'm weak. I'm afraid somebody's going to say I'm too vulnerable. I'm afraid somebody's going to say, oh, you're just acting like a little wimp. We've got to get a lot better at teaching people that your feelings are okay. And that's what's so critically important that people have to recognize. 100% of our feelings are okay. Every single feeling we have is all right. It's how we respond to those feelings that's so important. Instead of teaching people or trying to teach people to ignore what they're feeling, why don't we start giving them tips and tools for how to articulate those feelings in a positive way? This goes back to our kids as well. Kids have got to we have got to do a much better job at helping our children tell others how they feel when they're having problems internally. Suresh, you mentioned this in the beginning about the pandemic, about the shutdown. This has been a year and a half of asking people, not just children, adults as well. It's been a year and a half of asking people to suppress something that we're hardwired to do. It's part of our evolutionary advantage to connect with people. So for a year and a half, we've asked people to just not connect, just shut down whatever it was you were feeling, just stop doing that. Okay, that's going to have some sort of long-term impacts on everybody. Now what we're seeing is, this is no surprise to anybody, but we see mental health issues skyrocketing. We see suicide skyrocketing. We see all these substance abuse issues because people are not used to this. They don't know how to handle it. They don't know how to deal with it. Mental toughness is all about emotional control. Not trying to ignore it, learning to channel it in a positive way. If we can learn these tips, if we can learn these tools for how to start to recognize when we're getting emotional, we can stop ourselves before we do things that are going to be detrimental to our family, to our friends, to our business, or even us personally. I'm infatuated, if anybody here is big into sports, right? We just had the Olympics, obviously. The Olympics was a big thing. So I'm so infatuated with these athletes, and regardless of how you feel about Simone Biles, I don't want to try and get worked up here, okay? I don't want to get hate mail from anybody. I'll keep all my thoughts personal on this, whatever. I'm not going to share that with you guys. But if you take someone like her, this is all about performance under pressure. You look at these athletes, they train all their lives to get put in these situations, and then the lights come on and some of them choke, or the lights come on and some of them can't handle that pressure. That is training that people receive. Intelligence training, normally from what I've found, the only place I see people that have received any sort of skill on this is military, professional athletes, and law enforcement. That's all. Those are the only people who get it. Because here's what it boils down to. Okay, when it comes to sports or anything else in life, these athletes especially, they're all physically trained. They're all at that peak level of physical training. It's the mental training that differentiates the gold medalists from the also-rans. This is how it works in real life too. So the more capable people are to acknowledge the emotion and then channel it in a positive way, the better off they are. And the point is here to not allow those emotions to bleed over to other parts of our lives. In mental toughness world, we call this compartmentalization. That's officially the biggest word in my language, and I have no idea how to spell it. I can tell you what it means. Compartmentalization is the ability to set aside our emotions, to set aside our feelings, and not allow one to bleed over into the other. So we're able to be put in these situations where whatever's happening at home, let's say, is not going to trickle over to what's happening at work. Same way, what's happening at work won't trickle over to what's happening at home. Professional athletes, high performers, these are people that are very good at compartmentalizing. They remain in control of their emotions at all time, and they constantly put themselves in situations where they feel uncomfortable. You've all heard that old phrase, right? You have to get comfortable being uncomfortable. This is what people who are mentally tough do. In the world of mental toughness, it's called systematic desensitization. Two more big words. I'll tell you what they mean. You systematically desensitize your brain to fear, to pain, to whatever it is that's causing you havoc, that's wreaking you havoc. It's also known in the world of psychology as graduated exposure therapy. You consistently put yourself in a place where when you're put in the real live situation, you've already been there mentally. You've already prepared for it. So when it comes down to dealing with people, with handling stuff internally, we have to recognize that the more we can experience these things, the better our brain becomes accustomed to it. But critically important, some things are outside of what we're able to correct internally. Okay, as a society, we have to do a much better job of this, letting people know that it's okay if you're suffering internally, especially our boys. Okay, I do a lot of media on this. I talk about males. I talk about the inability for males to express emotions and to express things they're going through. This is a problem. There's no wonder why 78% of suicides are males. 80% of fatal heroin overdoses are males. 98% of mass shootings are males. When I give these statistics, when I'm speaking on a show or whatever, when I give those statistics, do you know the first thing people say to me? The very first thing they say when I give those statistics, they say, well, I'm not really surprised to hear that. Well, why are we not surprised to hear it? We should be surprised to hear it. Why is it? Why is it that boys and girls in preteen years experience and really respond to emotions very similarly, actually, up until they hit that 12 or 13-year-old age? Why all of a sudden do males and females start to handle things differently? I don't know the answer to that question. I think it deserves much more attention. People say, well, it's because of testosterone. Who knows? I believe personally it's because we are raising boys especially to learn that you cannot express, because if you do, you're going to be weak. When you suppress, when you hold stuff in, it's going to be a problem. So the takeaway point with this all is that the emotion is a good thing. We should use that emotion, but we should use the emotion for the why. That's what should drive us. In our personal lives, goal setting. I do a lot of stuff on New Year's resolutions. Why is it that 90+% of New Year's resolutions fail before the first end of January? Why is that? I'll tell you why it is, or at least I'll tell you my hypothesis. The problem is we set these goals, we set these New Year's resolutions, we rely on motivation to get us to the goal. Well, the problem is motivation is tied to how we feel. Our feelings tied to an emotion. So if we wake up in the morning and we feel good, we're going to stick to the diet. If we wake up in the morning and we don't feel good, we're not going to stick to the diet. And this transfers over into all parts of our lives, right? How many movies are there where boy and girl break up and someone's sitting on the couch bawling their eyes out with an 18-inch pizza and a tub of ice cream? Okay, that's emotions getting the best of them. So if we're able to set goals, then use emotions to create a strong why. A lot of you on here, you're attending an event like this, you're probably very familiar with vision boards or vision statements. The Secret was a book that was on this. You guys have probably seen The Secret. If you can create the vision with a strong emotion-based why, guess what? When going gets tough, when things are difficult, it doesn't matter if you're tired. It doesn't matter if you're upset. It doesn't matter if you're angry. It doesn't matter if you're sad. You're going to rely on that why. So you use the emotion for the why and the logic for the how. Okay, the ABCs and 1, 2, 3s are simple. We live in 2021. We can swipe right and get a car. We can swipe right and get a date. We can go on Google and figure out how to determine an algorithm for some sort of homework, which I use all the time for my kids, by the way. Side note, Google is great for learning equations for math, which I know nothing about. So you can go on Google for that. The how's the easy part. The how's simple. Anybody can show you how. What I'm talking about, what I'm referring to is all about the why. Why do you do what you do? What gets you out of bed in the morning? What is it that would put you where you would jump in front of a bus for whatever it is? A lot of people I've found that I've trained, that I've coached, that I've spoken to, a lot of people don't have that why. They don't know. When I ask that question, when I say, like, what do you want out of life? They say, well, I want to make more money. Well, ultimately what it boils down to is they want to make more money so they can do what they want to do. They want to do what they can do so they don't feel like they have to answer anybody. They want to answer anybody because they want to spend time with their kids. So the root of it is the more money they want to make is really they want to spend more time with their family. So why don't we develop a vision statement that's just so tuned in, so hyper-focused on how you can spend more time with your children, how you feel when you're doing it. Let's focus on that. So now we take all that mental energy and we do sniper fire on that mental energy. We focus on that. We direct all of our emotions towards it. So again, when the going gets tough, doesn't matter. I'm bigger than this because I know I have this in the back of my brain. I know this is why I'm doing what I'm doing. Guys, this topic, I catch so much slack on this, and I want to leave a couple minutes here at the end for question and answers. I catch so much slack on this, and it's funny because the first thing I hear from people is saying, oh, Eric, emotional intelligence. You're just teaching kids and teaching people how to be little wimps. You're telling them to go sit in a corner and cry. So until we get over that, until we get over what people think, which again is just so crazy to me, and you wonder what the problem is and why the problem is when you have people out there saying things like that. If we can just get over the fact and recognize that we all have emotion, we all feel emotion. If we can get over that and just realize that innately the person standing next to us wants to love us, wants to be kind to us, why can't we be kind to them just proactively without even having to say anything or do anything? Why can't we assume that person's going through a difficult time emotionally? The issue normally boils down to a lot of people, they're approval addicts. And this is another thing I talk on. I'll leave this with you guys. We are approval addicts. We are so hypersensitive to receiving approval from every person that we don't even know. We're posting pictures on social media. If we don't get enough blue thumbs, we're deleting it. Or if we don't have enough people comment on how great we look in our bathing suit, we process that emotionally and think something's wrong with us. If we want to grow, if we want to be able to remain happy, inside out happiness, we have got to find a better way to get rid of the approval addiction. We all suffer from it. Okay, to some level, there are very few people that I ever coach or train or speak to that do not suffer from some form of approval addiction. It's a difficult thing to get over. It's very difficult to accept because nobody wants to say, well, yeah, I'm addicted to the approval of other people, but it's a fact. Okay, our brain releases a chemical called dopamine. Dopamine is the happy chemical. So whenever something good happens to us, when we drink alcohol, when we go on these social media sites, our brain releases this dopamine. So what ends up happening is we have 24/7 untethered access to this device, our phone, that gives us these shots of dopamine when we post something and we get all these likes back or we get all this attention. That's a problem. For our kids especially, it's become more about social media than social interaction. That's an issue that needs to be addressed too. If we're giving them this tool in their hand that can, any day of the week, any minute of the day, they can go to and rely on for their happiness, that's going to create major problems in our society. Guys, I'll summarize with this. I use this for all my presentations, everywhere I speak, everybody I talk to. I channel my inner Lion King. It's a Hakuna Matata. Okay, it means no worries. I was going to wear my shirt today, but they wouldn't let me get through TSA with my Hakuna Matata shirt on. Okay, I was going to wear it for you guys, the lion on the front with Mufasa. Okay, Hakuna Matata, that's what this is all about. Don't try to shut down the emotion. Recognize other people are struggling, and let's help each other. Take control of the emotion, use it in a positive way, use it in a way that will help others, and let's just all get along with each other. I'm going to leave you with that. I want to leave a couple minutes here too, Serge, if you're there. I know we're going to leave a few minutes at the end here for a question and answer if anybody wants to.
First of all, Eric, really amazing session. It's even just so gratifying to hear all these things because you don't normally hear this type of discussion in the public, right? Social media is very superficial. A lot of the conversations we have, unfortunately, are very superficial, whether they're with family, friends, or at work, right? So it was just really refreshing for me to hear you speak about these topics. I did have a few questions for you. So early on, you brought up the fact that men are predominantly much more likely to be depressed, to be suicidal, and overall have more mental health issues. Why do you think that is, and why do you think that women are not subject to those same statistics? Are women just generally stronger mentally and emotionally? I mean, is that the reason? Or I would love to hear your 2 cents on that.
Yeah, so there's a multitude. I claim to know the pinpoint to one main thing. From the boys' standpoint, I can tell you 2 things that I've kind of hammered down that I believe to be fairly accurate, and I think I have a pretty good stance on this. I think I have some pretty good data that would support it. The number one thing for boys, I believe, it's lack of fathers. You can cut the cake any way you like. We're suffering from a dad epidemic in this country. Unfortunately, kids are being raised without fathers. I'm not taking anything away from women raising children. They do an amazing job, but this is a 2-way street. Children require, male and female parenting. We parent differently. Males parent differently than females. Females, they're going to elaborate more. They're going to explain more. They're going to give them, this is why, and this is how. Whereas men are going to teach them, hey, jump in the deep end of the pool. Don't do this again. Find a way to fix it. Maybe teach them some more critical thinking stuff. So the number one thing I believe is the fact that boys are growing up without fathers is why I think that we see these statistics skewing towards the males. The number 2 thing is the emotional suppression. Again, what we're recognizing right now is a society of males who have been told their whole life to not tell anybody how they feel. That is dangerous. So what they're doing is they're being put in these situations where they have conflicting points of view. They're being put in situations where they work with people or see people, or they get feedback from social media that have views that conflict with what they believe internally. And they've been taught no tools for how to express their disdain for that other than violence, anger, and getting all these, it's crazy. What we're realizing right now is a society of kids who, number 1, boys have grown up without fathers. Number 2, they're taught that they're not allowed to tell anybody what they're doing internally.
Sure, sure. No, I definitely agree with that. Eric, on my comment earlier about women being stronger, I'm curious about that because growing up, I had a very strong women around me. My mother, my sister specifically, and I grew up with this bias, inherent bias that women are mentally tougher than men. So while I acknowledge your point about fatherless homes being a challenge, of course. Do you, and not to put you on the spot, Eric, but do you think that women are just better at managing stress and being mentally tougher, or do you think that that's just me with my personal experience?
I don't believe that it's gender specific, to be honest with you. I would, if you look statistically and said, okay, women as a whole, are they better at controlling emotion, that being able to articulate how they feel, being okay with expressing internal strikes they might have, are they better at that? I would say yes. They're more accepted. It's more acceptable for that, right? So it's okay for a woman to do that. Would I say it's gender specific? No, I don't think that, inherently women are they're born with this separate gene that gives them the ability to be more mentally tough. We all have the capacity for it. I just believe that men are required to suppress that. If you have males that are in a household, or if they're brought up in a way that they're able to express that, I think you would find there'd be very minimal difference between men and women. That's my personal thought.
No, that's a fair point, Eric. I appreciate that. Eric, the other thing that you brought up, which was really interesting, and I'm guilty of it, I'm a victim of it, whatever you want to call it, is approval addiction, right? Really, really enlightening to hear you bring that up. I think everyone I know is always, seeking approval. Even folks that I don't know. I mean, you see it on social media, like you said, if you're not getting enough likes, that's a big social problem right now, right? Obviously, in my opinion, social media is the big culprit behind that. What are, and you mentioned some of the circumstances around it, but in our day-to-day specifically, what are some of the things we can do to combat that, to maybe empower others? But that's a topic that I'm really sensitive about as well. Any additional thoughts on that?
Yeah, and the unfortunate part about this, Suresh, I mean, unless we are in total control and understanding that as we go through our social media stuff, as long as we're in total control of the fact that we're going to respond emotionally to what we're reading and seeing, unless we can recognize that and proactively prepare our brains to say, when I put this phone down, I'm probably not going to be the same way. I'm not going to feel the same way I was before I picked it up. If they can remain in control of that, it's okay. Anything in moderation, right? Everything's okay in moderation. Alcohol in moderation is okay. Too much alcohol is not okay. Gambling in moderation is okay. Too much gambling is not okay. Same exact thing with social media. But unfortunately, I think what we're finding right now is just the only way to really be able to separate is just to limit, to reduce exposure. And again, when it comes to children, I wrote a paper on this actually. It's called Histrionic Personality Disorder. And it's actually a psychological term that I really equate to social media. And this is where people are addicted to what people think about them. They're always so worried, so self-conscious about how they look. They get so sensitive to stuff that people say and do. This is an actual disorder that I believe is exacerbated by the social media thing. Again, you have these people that just rely on that phone for every ounce of happiness in their life. If they don't get it from there, their life is ruined. There needs to be some control there. And with our children especially, if they're taught to think that everything revolves around, those thumbs up buttons, what else could we expect to get?
Absolutely. No, I think the message there, Eric, which I would agree with you on, is disconnect, right? I think that's what I'm hearing from you. Is I think we as a society, as parents, as human beings, I think we need to disconnect, right?
Moderation. It's all moderation, Suresh. Again, I'm a big fan of that. It's the same thing. I do everything with the males, with violence, unfortunately, with the mass shootings. Everybody wants to come at me with the video games, right? And I'm like, hey, there are plenty of people who play these violent video games and don't go out and commit mass murder. It's all moderation. So to say social media should be gone, I don't believe it should. But if we can't perch internally, it's called metacognition. It's the ability to think about our thoughts. If we don't possess that, if we don't have the ability to analyze our own thoughts and recognize when it's becoming overwhelming, that's an addict, right? It's someone who can't control what they're doing. That's a problem.
Right. Absolutely. Balance is the way to go in every part of our life, Eric. Thanks. Eric, my final point was, what can we do in our daily lives to help others? Any exercise that we can partake in that allows us to be more open with each other and more supportive of each other?
I think, and again, this sounds kind of pie in the sky, Suresh. I'm sorry. Like I said, I'm not a unicorn kind of guy. I'm not a Skittles kind of guy. I think it's just realizing that we're hardwired to love each other, to like each other. It's what we do. We have got to stop allowing other people, social media, media in general, we have to stop allowing them to tell us who we're supposed to like and not like. We have to assume that people are all going through difficult times mentally. I hear this phrase they talk about, well, we're all in the same boat with the pandemic, right? And I take that a step further and say, we're not all in the same boat. We're all in the same storm. But the way we came into this storm, our boat might have been a 50-foot yacht that was totally staffed. It might have been a 5-foot inflatable with one hole and one paddle, right? So from a mental standpoint, we all entered this on a different level of mental preparedness. I personally believe we should all be approaching people, interacting with people, assuming that they're struggling internally and trying to leave that person better than the way we found them.
Absolutely appreciate that, Eric, and couldn't agree with you more. Eric, it's been such a wonderful, wonderful treat for me to experience you speak. And I look forward to many, many more opportunities to do that. You've gained a fan today in me, and of course in our whole audience. You're absolutely amazing, and I'm privileged to have witnessed you in action. Eric, thank you so much. We'll be in touch. Have a good rest of your day. Please stick around. We have some wonderful speakers following you as well.
Sir, I appreciate the kind words, sir. Thank you so much for that. Deep bottom of my heart. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir. Thank you so much. Thanks.
Take care.